My mom pretended to celebrate my wedding, then planned her own. The day I got engaged was perfect. More than perfect, actually. My fiancé had proposed in front of our families, just like I had always dreamed. The way he smiled as he held out that ring, the way our families cheered with excitement, it felt like my life had finally fallen into place. It was one of those rare moments when everything was right, like the universe had pressed pause, just for me. I wanted to bottle that feeling, hold on to it forever. But little did I know that perfect moment would be short-lived. The next day, I got a call from my mom. I expected her to gush about the proposal, ask me about wedding plans, and share in my excitement like any mother would. I mean, that's what moms are supposed to do, right? Celebrate with you, guide you through the planning, make the whole thing about you and your big day. But this was my mom we were talking about, and she had a way of making things different. Even so, I wasn't prepared for what she was about to tell me. She said in this casual, offhand way, "I'm about to be engaged too." At first, I thought I misheard her. I even laughed a little, thinking she was joking. But no, she was serious, dead serious. My mom was on the verge of engagement. I could barely process the words. I mean, what? To whom? She hadn't been in a stable relationship for years. In fact, the last time we talked, she was juggling 3 men. Yes, 3. So naturally, my first question was, wait, to who? And she just laughed like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Oh, I've been dating someone from work for over a year now. We decided to get married." I sat there, stunned, the phone pressed to my ear. Dating for a year? This was news to me, and to my siblings too, I was sure. None of us had ever even heard of this man. He wasn't one of the guys she had been bringing around. No, this was someone completely new, someone she hadn't bothered to mention until right after I got engaged. A new mystery man, just dropped into the mix without any warning. I remember sitting there, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it, trying to reconcile this new information with the mom I knew. The mom who had cycled through relationships like clockwork, one after another, each man a temporary fixture in our lives before disappearing just as quickly as he had arrived. But now, she was serious about someone? Serious enough to marry him? "None of you guys have met him yet," she added casually, like that wasn't a huge red flag. I didn't know what to say. My mouth went dry, my thoughts scattered. What was I supposed to do with this information? Should I be happy for her? Should I congratulate her? Or should I just wait and see if this was another one of her flings, one of those men who'd be here today, gone tomorrow? I mentally checked out of the conversation. I couldn't deal with it. Not now. Not when I was still riding the high of my own engagement. I just nodded along, murmuring, "Uh-huh," as she rattled on about how excited she was for me to meet him. It was all too much. Too soon. So I did what I always did when it came to my mom. I detached. I went to that place in my head where I let things happen without reacting. A place where I didn't feel the weight of her words. Because the truth was, I had learned a long time ago not to take my mom too seriously. Her relationships, her decisions, they always had a way of falling apart. This one, I told myself, would be no different. So, I smiled through the phone, said something polite, and got off the call as quickly as I could. But the damage was already done. In the space of a 5-minute conversation, my mother had taken what should have been my moment and twisted it into hers. Months passed. Wedding planning became a full-time job for me and my fiancé. We talked about venues, guest lists, colors, everything. I was so excited to be planning my big day. I'd always pictured my wedding as this magical day where everything was perfect, and it was finally happening. The one thing that was missing, my mom. It wasn't that she wasn't around physically, though she wasn't. It was that she had completely checked out of my life. Not one phone call, not one text, nothing. While I was knee-deep in planning, she was busy with her own wedding. And she wasn't just planning it casually. No, she was planning it based on my tentative dates. My wedding plans, which were still in the early stages, became her blueprint. I should have seen it coming, honestly. This was my mom, after all, the woman who had always managed to make every important moment in my life about her. Birthdays, graduations, even little things like school events. Somehow she found a way to turn them into a reflection of her life, her needs. But I had hoped, foolishly maybe, that this time would be different. I thought deep down that this was my moment, my time to shine, and maybe, just maybe, she would step aside and let me have it. But no. Instead, she threw herself headlong into planning her own wedding while I was left to pick up the pieces of mine. And the worst part? I didn't even hear about it from her. No, I got all my mom's wedding updates through my grandmother, the same grandmother who had always been my rock, my constant, the one person who actually cared about how I was doing. She was the one who would call me and gently bring up my mother's plans, always trying to soften the blow, always walking the fine line between being supportive of me and not wanting to upset my mom. And I knew it hurt her. I could hear it in her voice. My grandmother, caught in the middle of this emotional tug of war, wanting to be there for me but also not wanting to ruin her relationship with my mom. She knew how much this was hurting me. But what could she do? She was stuck in the middle. I, on the other hand, was done. Done waiting for my mom to step up. Done hoping she would reach out, ask me about my wedding, offer to help. Because deep down, I knew she wouldn't. Then, one day, out of the blue, my mom finally called. For a second, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe she's going to ask about my wedding plans. Maybe she'll finally show some interest, give me the support I've been longing for. But no, the call wasn't about me at all. It was about her, again. She spent the entire conversation talking about her plans, her venue, her dress, her flowers. I sat there, listening to her go on, waiting for my moment, waiting for her to ask me something, anything, about my own wedding. But it never came. So I broke my silence. I asked, "What about my wedding?" There was a pause, a brief moment where I thought she might realize what she was doing. But instead she said, "Well, Grandma told me you were going to wait a year, so I'm hurrying up to get mine done first. After that, I can focus on you and yours." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wedding was now an afterthought, something she'd focus on once hers was out of the way. I didn't say another word. What was the point? There was no reasoning with her. No amount of arguing would change the fact that my mother had decided her wedding was more important than me. Fast forward a few months, and my mom got married, just like that. She sent out invitations, told the family, and walked down the aisle with a man none of us had ever met. I went to the wedding, of course, because that's what you do, right? You show up for family, even when it hurts. Even when it feels like a punch to the gut. My grandma, bless her heart, told me to give my mom the benefit of the doubt. She said, "Maybe after the wedding she'll come around. Maybe she'll help with your plans, like she said she would." And I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that after her wedding was over, my mom would step up, offer to help me with mine, and we'd finally have that mother-daughter bond I had always dreamed of. But deep down, I knew better. Lo and behold, after her wedding, my mom disappeared. No calls, no texts, no offers of help. Nothing. When Grandma asked her about it, she'd always say, "Oh, I'm going to give her some money for the wedding." But that money never came. It was just another empty promise, another lie. And I realized something during that time. My relationship with my mom, it had always been like this. She had always been selfish, always put herself first. But I had never really seen it for what it was. Or maybe I had, but I didn't want to admit it. I had always clung to the hope that one day things would be different. That one day she would wake up and realize how much she had hurt me, how much I needed her. But that day never came. Eventually, it was time for my wedding, and I made a decision. I made sure my mom had no hand in it. None. I didn't want her there hovering over me, trying to make the day about her. I didn't want her input, her advice, or her promises of help that would never come. And you know what? It was the best decision I ever made. Because when my wedding day arrived, it was perfect. It wasn't perfect because everything went off without a hitch. Far from it. There were little things that went wrong, as they always do. But it was perfect because for once, I was surrounded by people who truly cared about me. My husband, my friends, my grandma, everyone who was there for me. They wanted to see me happy, to celebrate me. And my mom? She wasn't the center of attention. She was just another guest, sitting quietly in the background, pretending like she hadn't tried to overshadow my big day. That's the funny thing about family. Sometimes the people you expect to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. And it's not always intentional. Sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it. But that doesn't make it hurt any less. I've spent years trying to understand my mom, trying to figure out why she does the things she does, trying to make sense of the way she always puts herself first, even when it hurts the people she's supposed to love. But maybe there's no understanding it. Maybe that's just who she is. And maybe I've finally made peace with that. Because here's what I've learned. You don't need someone else's validation to be happy. You don't need their approval to live your life. I spent so many years waiting for my mom to give me the love and support I craved, only to realize that I didn't need it. I never did. In the end, my wedding wasn't just about getting married. It was about something bigger. It was about breaking free. Free from the expectations, free from the need for validation, free from the shadows I had lived in for so long. And as I walked down that aisle with my husband waiting for me at the end, I realized something. I wasn't walking down the aisle alone. I was walking toward a new life, a life where I could finally be happy, where I could finally be at peace with who I was. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. My mom and I, we don't really have a relationship anymore. We talk occasionally, but it's never the same. It's like she pretends nothing happened, like she didn't race me to the altar, like she didn't turn what should have been my happiest time into a competition. But that's okay, because I've moved on. I've let go of the need for her to be someone she's not. And in that letting go, Eva found something even more important. Eva found me. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Stories Unfolded. Have you ever faced a situation like this? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about family, faith, and the challenges we face in life.